Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, what is up, what is good? The King of Lightning here today, bringing you guys and gals One Piece chapter 1190 official review. This chapter of One Piece is one hell of a chapter. Wow, Scopper Gaban versus Emu. A lot better of a show than what I first thought it would be. Scopper put on a show against the king of the world, as Luffy is attempting to recover from the stab stick in the previous chapter, and Scopper completely annihilates a section of the Jewel Tree Atom, like one of the smaller branches, and Emu's feeling it. And now there's talks about, of course, because it's a battle shonen, the power scale, and Scopper, Luffy, other characters run to the mix, like Loki, of course, the Emperors of the Sea, Kaido, Big Mom, X, Y, Z in the third, okay? And I will cover a lot of these things in other videos in the future, but this is gonna be just a focused video on the chapter itself when it comes to its main components, the pace and structure, the story progression, and of course, the character elements of the chapter, because there's a lot going on for story in this chapter. The chapter is at a face value, focused and critical for the power scale, but it's also pretty damn good and deep for the lore and the totality of the story's progression. So the chapter's quite a bit, which is why I'm doing a full-on review for this chapter. And if you don't know, now you know, I have to do this PSA. I do episode reactions to One Piece episodes on my Patreon first and foremost, that are uploaded to my cold reaction channel. One Piece, like currently we have Yanni Neck over there right now, Black Torch, Job's Reincarnation, House of the Dragon, From, and so on and so forth. I do get questions constantly about where this content is at. Check them out in the description box down below. And also, we did do a live stream reaction to the chapter on my Cole Requiem YouTube channel, where I do my manga, my manhwa, and soon my comic read-throughs on that channel. We're everywhere. I'm doing a lot. But for this channel and for this content, the bread and butter is always that One Piece. So let's get into this chapter review with, of course, focusing on the three main components that make the chapters either great or meh. And first of all, we have the pace and chapter structure. There is essentially a total of one component. This is outstanding. I think that Oda is at his best when it comes to chapter pace and structure, when it's just mainly one component, like for example in chapter 1045, where in that chapter the main focus is just Monkey D versus Kaido, right? In this chapter you have Scopper Gaban versus Emu, but it has conjunctional parts to it, where we do get some micro flashbacks, recollections from both Emu and Gaban, when Emu recalls King of the Pirates Roger, and then when Gaban also recalls what Roger told him way back when. And then also we get a conjoining part where we see the damage of that smaller branch of the Jewel Tree Atom falling down into the underworld. And then also we guess he's going back in the Sun World with Loki, Usopp, Nami, and company. Now you could argue that when we cut back to the Sun World to see Loki and company, that's actually conjoined with the Scopper and Luffy fight, because they're essentially reacting to what's going on miles away in that area of Elbaf. But if you want to say it's also a certain part, that's fine too. So either you have one part, or you have a break in that one part where you cut over to the Sun Realm, and then we go back to Luffy and Gaban into the chapter. So it'll be three parts essentially. So either have one part or three parts, which I would say is phenomenal either way. That's a 9 or 10 out of 10 for pace and chapter structure, okay? It's simple, easy to follow. We're not going all over the place. We're focusing on the main meat here. Scopper's last hurrah, likely last hurrah against the almighty Emu of Nerona, the king of the world. So that is it when it comes to pace structure. Very, very, very damn good. After that, we have the character elements for this chapter. And this chapter does not skimp even on the character elements. So like this chapter rating, like you already tell, it's gonna be very high. Spoiler warnings for the end of the video. First of all, let's tackle the simplest. Number one is Usopp. For character components, Usopp is number one. Usopp continues to display the growth of his haki. And Nami's like, huh? What's going on? Usopp is able to not only sense that something happened to Luffy in a previous chapter, but now he's able to sense that there was someone else who was fighting, and that person is someone that's devastatingly strong, Gaban. So Usopp continues to make observation haki gains. Usopp can now differentiate between individuals based on their haki type, frequency, what they want to call it. So Usopp now can tell that it's someone else fighting against that person, and they're devastatingly strong. So Nami, wait, what's going on? Usopp's haki is improving, and it's improving in real time. Will that lead to something that's more substantive in the future for Usopp in this arc? Potentially, but you can see how it is improving over the course of time, and it seems to be accelerating as this fight goes on between Imu and company. That's the first thing. Number one is going to be Usopp. Number two is Imu. Imu has another unique sword he pulls out from the Gilgamesh treasure vault. This sword is Honebami Toshiro. Toshiro sucks in Bleach. You don't know, I did a video on that one. Over here. Hitsugaya is ass. However, this Toshiro is far from. According to the scans, in relation to one of the big three blacksmiths, and this sword seems to have a very unique ability, like every sword in Imu's arsenal. He pulls out this sword once again from the ring behind him, and the sword comes with some sort of omen skull-faced phantom that circles around the sword. When he first goes for a swinging motion on Gaban, Gaban is cut or he's damaged by this phantom. You see two phantoms. When he goes to that swing, Gaban goes, ugh. He's able to block it kind of, but you have that sound effect, and you see blood coming from Gaban's right shoulder on the first swing. And you see those two phantoms that appear near Gaban. So the phantoms seem to have some sort of ability where they can slice and dice, or they can target the body in some unique way. As far as I understand, the Honebami name means bone eater. So it could be the case here where it's not just slicing, but it's actually eroding and targeting the bones from the inside out. So they cut as they go through, and then they can target the bones, particularly to erode them, so it causes more lasting damage, potentially. Furthermore, we see later on in the chapter, when you have, after the Gate of God, Gaban does his flurry of air cuts. Imu trajects his Honebami sword to target Gaban's left shoulder, and he could actually cut off Gaban's arm in the process. That's insane. So what seems to happen if you zoom in is that the Honebami phantom seems to dart past the air cuts, like zigzag through them, in a very similar way to when Kaido's in that thieving drunk dragon form, where he can dart through Snake Man, and then he actually gets that attack on Luffy. Same principle here. And then it cuts through Gaban's left shoulder. Gaban's left shoulder is still there to an extent in the next panel over when you see him talking, but then in the end of the chapter, you see his arm is detached, which is why I'm saying that could be, let's say, a mix of both here, because you do see that sound effect on the Honebami's cut on Gaban's shoulder, the slice effect, but it's still on as the tree branch falls, and then you see later on where Gaban, it's detached. The fact of the matter is that even though Gaban is old, he does have very strong defenses. He's way, way tougher than the average person. Since this thing could cut off Gaban's arm, that is extremely impressive. It may not seem like much compared to the devastation that Gaban rots on the Jewel Tree Atom on that one branch, but the potency of that one phantom is extraordinary. Just how you argue in a similar way to when Brogy got his arm blown off by the gun that Imu fired via Shuri, where that gun has insanely high attack power because it can blow away Brogy's arm, who is a very tough individual. Same concept here. So once again, Imu displaying an insanely versatile and powerful bag. Imu also, you could argue that whenever stigma is attached to somebody, he has to hard commit to it unless he's interrupted by an attack of some kind, because we do see in the chapter where as Gaban is setting up for his Gate of God move, Imu is still committed to the stigma because that little homie still attached to Luffy when Luffy's on the ground writhing in pain. So you can argue that when it comes to stigma, he has to hard commit to it, potentially, unless the ult gets canceled, as my Marvel rival terms come out. That may or may not be a thing for Imu, particularly for, let's say, his combat scheme, but I'll throw it in there just in case. After Imu, we have Scopper Gaban himself. I would assume that in terms of the power scaling, Rayleigh could also be the same way, where it's a very good showcase against Imu. You could argue the best showcase among the individuals so far between Loki, Luffy, and Imu. However, this chapter does clarify something that I'll touch upon in the future. But Scopper Gaban does put on a pretty good showcase against Imu. Number one, is that we get to see his speed, where after the clash of the Xintiang axe versus Scopper's axes, Emu does do a side swip on Scopper, which he dodges quite easily. And then he's on the tree hanging over him. Pretty cool pose, I'm gonna lie to you. But then we get to see, after his pep talk to Luffy, let's call it that, we do get to see Scopper utilize a new move called the Mantis Axe style Mantis Plum, which seems to be a sort of sonic wheel rotation, like a Typhlosion wheel rotation of axe spins that Emu blocks in the same way that he blocked Luffy's attack 2 chapters ago, where he spins his weapon around to make a shield. Afterwards, when Emu targets Luffy again, Stigma, Gaban decides to annihilate that part of the Jewel Tree Atom. It's the branch where it got eroded away via the Sword of Vohu. It looks like Gaban has to once again devour. And as he does charge his haki, his joints are creaky. It sucks to be old, X, Y, and Z. So you can see how, just like Garp, just like Sengoku, just like Rayleigh, the older they get, Whitebeard, right? The old age of these individuals always holds them back. They're not the same guys they used to be. Despite that, though, Gate of God is the move that we see him perform. And the Gate of God is a very powerful move. Now, I think this is a critical mass haki move, but in the next page, we do get to see him have more haki on his axes when he does the 8,000 tribal leaders. So this may not be critical mass, but it's still a metric ton of haki. And the way it's designed, it seems like the bolts themselves, he applies cutting attributes to the haki bolts themselves, which then sever that large section of branch. Though they could still be air cuts, but they're modified in some way. So like, for example, right? When Garp first did the Galaxy Impact in the manga, in the anime, it's in the anime, it's something else crazy. But in the manga, when you see that move, you see how it's a shockwave dome, because it's Garp punching with physical force, making a shockwave. And in that process, the shockwave has haki bolts that are huge on the outside of it. So it's a shockwave that's amplified via Conqueror's haki infusion. This could be the same thing here, where the air cuts are like pseudo-invisible. You can't see them. And the bolts of lightning of Conqueror's haki are on top of the cuts themselves. Or let's say it's more like Kaido's Vajra arrow in chapter 1024. The haki becomes a projectile, and then the haki beam itself does the damage. So it's hard to tell, I think, with Gaban's attack. I do wonder if Gaban was the one that cut that other part branch that was removed where the village Hugin used to be. We saw in episode 1171. I don't know if the time frame was ever stated about when Hugin was cut. So maybe Scopper was the one that actually cut off that piece of the Jewel Tree Atom that was on fire years ago. But the potency, you know, is insane because it's Jewel Tree Atom. You can see its durability when it falls down to the underworld. The mountains are getting crushed by the Jewel Tree Atom pieces that fall down to the bottom. We see that in the main trunk, Loki can use his attack with his hammer and the trunk doesn't even dent. Even the Thorheim didn't make a dent either. And to be fair, that's the main trunk of the Jewel Tree Atom, right? The branches are not the same durability. The trunk is probably way more durable than that. Fair enough. But at the same time, the branch is much tougher than, let's say, things like steel or Wappo metal. It's much tougher than that. Even still, you can make chunks of the Jewel Tree Atom branch. That's insanely powerful. And it's to the point where, just like the Thorheim, Emu has to use his Omen Barrier to defend against the attack. Once again, we can see the blood on his lips and we'll see the blood on his head. So Emu is taking damage from Gaban's attack. And even after the Gate of God haki move, which again I think could be a critical mass move, but maybe not all of his mass, you could argue, just still critical, Emu still has to maintain that barrier while Gaban does the 8,000 tribal leaders, the Yachi Takeru, where we saw him use against Luffy and Zoro when they were inside the castle. But in the process, his arm does get caught off by the Honebami Phantom. Amazing. Absolutely phenomenal showcase from Scopper Gaban in this chapter of One Piece. And for the entire arc as a whole, honestly, he's been phenomenal. We don't know, obviously, the full scope of what the attack was for the Gate of God. Was it an air cut? Was an air cut combined with the haki per se? Was haki itself? Did haki change to a slash? I'm not too sure. I still don't know. All right, I really don't. But I think it's still very impressive nonetheless in terms of the attack power because it has Emu on the back foot. It is, you could argue, safe to say that Scopper had the best showcase against Emu, though to be fair, Emu's condition is only getting worse, right? So Emu is in a worse condition than he was when he fought against Loki, Luffy, because you can see how the timer for Emu, that timer is waning. It is waning. And then finally, fourth character, Monkey D. Luffy. Even though he's getting a lot of flack nowadays, Luffy is still maintaining Gear 5. This is an endurance feat, a very impressive endurance feat, where he gets stabbed by the Sword of Vohu, which drains life force at an incredible rate. Furthermore, he got stabbed by the Sword of Frogratch, which we don't know what that sword does exactly. Maybe it double taps the life force thing, not too sure. But in the previous chapter, we saw how he pointed to one of the sections of the branch and it just got desiccated. So we don't know what that does exactly. He got stabbed by 2 super swords and got saved by Gaban, true. Was immobile, true. But he maintained Gear 5 and seemingly is able to fight now after some resting, after some healing, quote unquote. So Luffy has an endurance feat that's very impressive, because I'm willing to bet that if, let's say, Gaban or Amos got stabbed by the Sword of Vohu, they'd also be immobilized too, because that sword is so potent. But fighting after the fact is very challenging to do, and Luffy can still do that. And again, he's maintaining the Gear 5. So we'll get more insights on this as time goes on. So as when it comes to character, overall, a character, I mean, it's another 10 out of 10, boys. It's another 9 to 10 out of 10. You can see where this is going. You can see. And then finally, we have, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the story progression components for this chapter. And this chapter, even on these fronts, does not skimp. First of all, obviously, you do have Gaban coming in there and saving Luffy, where Gaban was able to hit the tree trunk in a way to where all these cut in a way to where the 2 giant swords get popped out and Luffy is freed. Then at this point in time, Gaban proceeds to kind of coach, scold, give a lot of tough love to Luffy. A lot of kids with tough parents, they understand this, okay? The tough love. But in Gaban's case, it's him also mainly recontextualizing what it means to be Pirate King. Luffy going into the fight was clearly taking Emu seriously, because you can see beforehand, he felt Emu's hockey. It was harsh, it was heavy. So he was supercharging himself to fight against Emu. That was very obvious. So he was taking the fight seriously. But Gaban says, don't get full of yourself. So it's possible that Luffy got too conceited with his abilities and his power at that point in time, because in base form, in Gear 1, he did sock Emu in the face, and then afterwards, he was doing a bit of trolling, making fun of Emu in terms of the Majin, the genie form. He was taking it serious, because you can see what he's doing leading up to the fight, but he got maybe too full of himself during that fight. In a way, you could argue, very Saiyan-like in Dragon Ball Z. He speedruns the entire post-Marineford arc Jinbei stuff, where Luffy has to realize that if he falls here and now, obviously, not only can he not save Elbaf, but his crew can also get wiped out as well. And then Gaban, when it comes to, again, recontextualizing me Pirate King, he explains how, listen, King of the Pirates doesn't mean that it's gonna be all hunky-dory. You are someone that is targeted the most. When you die, the world cheers. You're the king of the pirates. You are enemy numero uno. When someone like Roger died, the Great Pirate was kicked off because of the One Piece treasure they left behind. And folks wanted that treasure. He himself, as king of the pirates, people wanted him dead. Across the world. In droves. By the billions. But because of the treasure behind, people wanted the fame. They wanted the fortune. They wanted the wealth, the riches, the power, so on and so forth. So the idea is that if you're gonna be Pirate King, it comes at a great cost. And being in of itself comes with certain burdens that you don't expect. And so Luffy, in a general sense, has to step his game up and not be so conceited, even though he's gotten much, much stronger over the course of time. And the idea, too, the undercarriage of all this is the fact that Gaban understands what Luffy should be in the future. So beforehand, Emu asks Gaban, who are you? Who are you? And then Gaban says, one who knows the world. If he knows the world, then he knows all the sauce, including the Joy Boy sauce. Which is why after his pep talk, and Emu says, hold on, are you joking right now? Like, is this a meme? Like, what's going on? And he says, Emu, that kid, Luffy reminds you of Joy Boy, doesn't he? Right? And then Emu, who art thou? Dost thou recognize me? What dost thou know? The words of Joy Boy. So this confirms that on God Valley, Legolas to the Poneglyph, to the Mermaid Princess, Poseidon at that point in time, the words of Joy Boy are left behind on Laugh Tale, probably related to the Rio Poneglyph. Yeah, which is also why during the Odin flashback, Roger said the words he said about Joy Boy. Like, Joy Boy, I wish I was born during your time. Because Joy Boy's words are there. So there is a message from Joy Boy 100% that is there on Laugh Tale. And then when Gaban mentions that he's a member of the Pirate King's crew, we see Emu talking to the elders about Gold D. Roger. Why is D on the King of the Pirates? Spread not that name. Yes, Great One. That explains the reason why we're going to change the name of Gold D. Roger to Gold Roger. Everybody across the world recognizes the name Gold Roger, not Gold D. Roger. Because Emu was disgusted by how the King of Pirates name had the D initial in it. So that's why they changed the name from Gold D. Roger to Gold Roger on Emu's orders. Furthermore, when Gaban follows it up by saying, you see him as a threat, more the undercarriage, as to why Gaban had that pep talk. Because Gaban sees the true nature of Luffy. He sees the true nature of the Kid of Destiny, Chapter 1, Luffy's Journey of Destiny, right? Because Luffy is someone that he sees surpassing Gold D. Roger and company and them, then Luffy is not performing to the level that he should be at if he's going to surpass someone like Gold D. Roger. He can't just die here. What the hell? He's the Kid of Destiny. So it's also a stall tactic too in some way to make sure Luffy's good to go during that pep talk and to make sure Luffy has the right mindset moving forward. Probably a mindset more focusing on improving his skills, whether it be hockey or fruit related. Because again, Gaban knows the sauce. And he even says, then you're telling us that boy is the very man we've been waiting for. And among the members, you got to see Shanks. And recall this, in the God Valley flashback, when Shanks and the Gaban fight against Harald, Gaban calls Shanks the chosen one, probably in relation to Joy Boy, prophecies that were been told for a while now, X, Y, and Z. Like, for example, Oden's prophecy that he told way back when, the Toki who had that speech. And then also, we get to see Whitebeard. Now, why is Whitebeard there? Because you know that Roger, Gaban, Rayleigh, Crocus, and Oden, they were there at ground zero. Shanks wasn't there, but he knows. Because he just Shanks. He just knows. But why Whitebeard? Because Whitebeard was told about the decline stuff by Goldie Roger, remember, the Saki, Cherry Blossom Tree, and so on. And what does Whitebeard tell Blackbeard during Marineford War? You're not the one.
Roger が待ってる男は少なくともティーチおめえじゃねえ
You're not the one that Roger's waiting for. Whitebeard knew the sauce. Whitebeard also knew the sauce from Roger himself, and him being there helps contextualize that moment too. The person that all these cats are waiting for is Monkey D. Luffy. Now, Emu also, because he's willing to stop fight against Gaban and target Luffy, and then prior to, when they first clashed, Gaban and Emu flat out says, yeah, I want to kill Luffy. I think that only confirms the folks were saying for a while now, where Emu has treated Loki and Gaban differently compared to Luffy. Emu's hostility against those two is nowhere near as high compared to Luffy's, as he is the wielder of the Nika ability. So even though Loki and Gaban had better showcases against Emu than Luffy does, he was more hostile and trying arguably harder against Luffy than he was Gaban or Loki. And to be fair, against Gaban also, you can see him coughing up blood without taking any damage at all, meaning that the timer is slowly running out for Emu. He can't be for too long, like he said before when he first touched down. And there's also a theory too that I do like, where maybe because Gaban knows about all the sauce, given Laugh Tale, maybe he's also aware that if you put Emu closer to, let's say, the sea, he gets weaker. So in the Sun Realm, Emu is better off, but in the Underworld, he's gonna be worse off because of his proximity to the ocean water, potentially. If he's in the Underworld, it may take Emu more time to get back to the Sun Realm. Now, Luffy's irritated, of course, in Gaban, but he sees his arm cut off after Gaban did what he did to that section of the Jewelry Atom. The branches fall down to lower layer, and then you get to see Emu, who's probably stuck there too for a period of time, potentially. And then also you get to see what's going on with Gaban's condition, where he's lost an arm. And then Usopp can sense what's going on. We don't see Hiruden there in the area, so he's probably wandered off somewhere to try and help out, whatever we can see. But in terms of story, you see how there is a lot of damage to that Jewelry Atom 1, to the Underworld 2, and Gaban is out of commission. So in terms of story, within arc, very good. But for the greater story itself, also pivotal. because it does add context. You can infer all these things, fair enough, but they were never confirmed. Various things are now confirmed. What Whitebeard said to Blackbeard, confirmed. Shanks' intentions, confirmed. The masking of Roger's name, confirmed. Like, greater story components for the whole series get confirmation in this chapter, and there's no longer a need to infer. Now we just know. This chapter rating overall, I think it's a 10 out of 10. I think more so than the previous chapters, this chapter is, I think, definitively a 10 out of 10 chapter of One Piece. Oda does quite a bit of this chapter while having great focus and also excellent character improvements. Yes, a 10 out of 10 chapter of One Piece for this week. The only thing that sucks is that we have a break. Again, a Shonen Jump break, my God. But that's my stance on the subject matter at hand. Let me know your stance on this chapter of One Piece. And if you enjoy your boys' video, kind of give thumbs up. Sub to the channel. Of course, members do get access to the videos first. And click on that bell to join the notification squad. I'm going to catch you guys and gals on the flip side.